Shwmae pawb. Hello everybody. Croeso, welcome to my Wild Welsh Garden, to a very hot and dry wild Welsh garden. Yeah, we're in drought here, and do you know, I've been hearing from people in all sorts of different parts of the world saying exactly the same. But apparently it's raining in New Zealand. So yeah, I knew somebody somewhere must have been getting the rain. Um, yeah, but the news said that there's going to be significant rainfall in the UK next weekend. So, yes, me and my garden are very much looking forward to that. But we're halfway through May, so it's time to show you around the garden again, despite the fact that it's all a little bit droopy and suffering a little bit from the lack of rain. But we'll go around anyway and see what you think. This is the view from my summer house, just looking out at the lawn and flower beds and shrubs and trees. And what I'm trying to do with my garden is to wild it. And by that I mean to garden in a way which is more in keeping with ecological principles and less to do with sort of horticultural wisdom. And in wilding my garden, I want to make it better for wildlife. And at the moment, it's just absolutely buzzing with insects, which is really good news, given that last year was the worst year for insects on record. Maybe this year they're going to start to recover. So we start at the summer house. This is my little bit of lawn, and we're halfway through No Mow May. And the grass actually isn't growing very much. And there's not many flowers, and I think that's just lack of rain. And the bird bath in the middle here, I fill that up every day. I filled that up to the brim this morning and it's now half full. So yes, the birds are in desperate need of water. Last autumn I sowed some yellow rattle seeds, and that's a patch down there, and it does seem to have affected the grass. But I don't think that's the reason why the grass isn't growing over the rest of the lawn. The dandelions have all gone over. There's a few clocks left. There's daisies and some pink clover and one lonely fox and cubs. And then we go through the arch to the main path that goes up the middle of the garden. And this is made up of, with the edge of the trellis, an old metal pipe that came out of the mine, and some coppiced hazel. I'll show you what it looks like from the back door of the cottage. So on one side there's a honeysuckle, Copper Beauty, which is doing okay. And then nearer to me there's supposed to be roses and clematis. Clematis? Yes, so not exactly growing away. I would have expected them to have started this year because I only put the poles up last year. But I don't think the weather is helping them at all. It's all looking a little bit sad here. The rosemary's going over, the azaleas have gone over, the perennial candy tuft, the magnolia stellata and the pirises. But while we're here, I'll just take you out the front and show you what it looks like out there. My little house fronts straight onto the street. We brought one little Mexican fleabane with us and it's colonised all the front. To begin with, the local council killed it all with weed killer, but yes, I had a bit of a battle with them, and now I put signs out, and I'm just hoping that that stopped them. Last winter, I took all the plants out of this front bit and sowed a wildflower meadow. I don't know how many of the seeds have actually germinated. Not many, I think, just because it's been so dry. But I also put quite a few plug plants in, and they're flowering. There's also some Californian poppies which aren't supposed to be there, but they're really pretty, so they can stay. So now I go back through the side gate up the side of the house, which is a bit like a long dark tunnel because it's in shadow. And then there's the garden at the top. To the right here is the side garden where the polytunnel is. And there's a wild area and some shrubs and an azalea looking very sad. I think this hot, dry weather has caused everything really to just flower quickly and go over quickly, because this hardly seemed to be in flower and now it's just looking very sad. So we go back up the side of the house and into the sunshine and up those steps. To the left here there's just a series of little flower beds, and they're a mixture of non-natives and native plants. I've come over this side with the sun behind me. Well, there is a reason for having native plants. You see, I don't think an adult insect, a pollinator, cares whether the flower that it's visiting is native or non-native, to be honest. I think providing the flower produces plenty of pollen and nectar, I don't think the adult insect, the pollinator, is picky. But what is picky are the larval forms, so the caterpillars and the grubs. They need native plants to feed on because they usually feed on the leaves. So that's the reason for having native plants. But I do have to say that I have not yet found a caterpillar. There's a little climbing rose climbing up this old gate, which we brought with us, actually. I found it on the dump on our allotment in Wigan. And I used to grow runner beans up it in the polytunnel. And now it's here supporting this little rose. Absolutely covered in buds. It's going to look lovely. And just on the right here, there's some granny's bonnets with some very busy bees. But this is definitely foxglove time. I think the foxgloves are pretty much the star of the show, just at the moment. So we go up the middle path, past a very unhappy honeysuckle, just covered in aphids. Yes, I'm waiting for the ladybirds to appear, but I haven't seen one yet. And then on the trellis here, there's the first of the Gertrude Jekyll roses. She's looking quite happy. And then some lovely bird's foot trefoil in a hanging basket. I keep going on about this bird's foot trefoil, but I do love it. So through the rose arch, another pot of bird's foot trefoil, which is going over. And now you can see why it's called bird's foot, because the seed pods look just like a bird's foot. On the left is the secret garden and all my little wildflower seedlings, and the greenhouse. I've just been planting tomatoes in pots. And just to the left here, there's some ragged robin, which I grew from seed that I collected from the wild. And it's growing in a pot, because I've discovered that ragged robin actually germinates really very well. It's very efficient. And so I sowed what I thought was a reasonable amount of seed and got quite a lot of little plants. And I put some in the ground, which is struggling, but this is doing okay because it's in a pot and I've been watering it, because it does like damp ground. There used to be fields of this, used to be fields of pink in South Wales because there's such a lot of wet ground, but no more, I'm afraid, because all the wet fields were drained and improved for agriculture. I'm just sitting on the seat at the side of the secret garden. This is where I sit to count butterflies in the summer, except last year there weren't any to count. So I'm really hoping that there'll be some to count this year. And on the right here is my tiny forest. Well, for those of you who are maybe new to the channel and aren't familiar with this, tiny forests are supposed to be the best way of increasing biodiversity in a small space. And it's basically just a lot of little tiny native trees all planted very close together and just left to grow up together. And that's because our native trees support so many of our native wildlife. And they've all sort of surrounded by forget-me-nots, which had self-seeded in the veg patches. And I just moved them into here in the winter. And I'm just going to leave them to seed. And then the little new seedlings will be ground cover for the winter. And in the centre of the tiny forest is this standing deadwood structure, which is some poles and trunks that I've brought back from the woods. And this is because standing deadwood is a really good habitat for all sorts of mosses and lichens and insects, and very different from deadwood that's sort of lying down in piles. So that's the idea with this garden, really, is just to have all sorts of different habitats for as many different creatures as possible. And then we go up past the greenhouse to what I call the pond bed on the right there. And again, this is a mixture of natives and non-natives, and a very statuesque looking foxglove there. This is the wildlife pond that I made about 6 years ago now, and it has all sorts of wildlife in it, frogs and newts and dragonfly, damselfly nymphs, water boatmen, pond skaters. The birds come and drink from it, bathe in it. They do say that to add water in the form of a pond to your garden is one of the best ways of attracting wildlife and increasing biodiversity. And the pond is very, very low and looks really quite green and soupy. But there's nothing I can do about it. I can't put tap water in because that has too many chemicals which would upset the balance. And I used up all the rainwater in the water butts a long time ago. So I just have to wait for the rain. There's some more ragged robin in a pot here. And the hedgehog house that the hedgehog isn't visiting for food anymore. But I am putting water out because there is very little water in the countryside. And a little hedgehog might come in thirsty and want a drink. And then just down here, there's this disgusting looking bucket of what looks like stagnant water, because it is. And there's a bowl there, and these are what are called hoverfly lagoons, and that's because some species of hoverflies, their larvae like to live in stagnant water. And so there's several of these around the garden, But yeah, I have to admit I have not actually seen a hoverfly larvae in any of them. And then all along the back wall of my garden is a native hedge, which I've talked about such a lot in previous videos. I'm not going to say much, apart from to say that it is obviously for wildlife. So food for invertebrates, for the caterpillars of our native insects, mostly moths, and perching places, hiding places, nesting places for birds, and food for birds too. And food for insects, because it has flowers in the spring and then it has berries in the winter. Now, this is something I've never done before, allowing a rhubarb plant to flower. Yes, if I'd done this on our allotment in Wigan, I would have had a very strongly worded letter from the committee. And I did this to see if the insects would like it, and I actually haven't seen a single insect on it. So I think I'm going to cut it out, and I probably won't do that again. And now I'm standing in the shade of the hedge. It's quite cool under here, actually, just looking down the garden. And then to the right here, in this rather shady, gloomy part, there are some raspberries. Some autumn raspberries, which I just let grow wild, and some summer raspberries, and it's very busy with bees at the moment. I just come round the back of the greenhouse to try and get to the raspberries to fill me some bees, and discovered these cardinal beetles. These are not lily beetles. They don't eat the leaves of plants at all. They actually eat other insects. And this is my potting shed, which was here when I came, and I had it renovated. And then outside the potting shed there are two veg patches with a mixture of vegetables and fruit and flowers, looking a bit bare because everything's struggling to grow. And these are perennial cabbages, which I've allowed to flower for the insects, and the insects do like those. And I guess this is kind of a bit of an example of what I mean by wild gardening. This is creeping buttercup. Now, most gardeners would just be horrified to let it into their garden and have sleepless nights with it taking over and smothering everything. Well, this started from several years ago, and it's sort of crept along the edge of the vegetable patch here, but doesn't exactly show any signs of taking over the garden yet. I mean, you know, I may well rue the day, but so far I'm very happy with it. It's pretty, the insects like it, it supports an awful lot of invertebrates. So yeah, it has a home in my garden. I should mention the Welsh poppies, those lovely bright yellow flowers. They just pop up all over the garden. I don't do anything. I don't pull them out. I don't cut them off. They just appear and they disappear. And yeah, we live very happily together. And there's also autumn raspberries. And these I'm not letting go wild. I cut these down every winter. And I'm really hoping, because this is now their third year, that I'm going to get a decent harvest. So we go down the left side of the garden. There's a little narrow path here, and through an arch in a bit of native hedge. It was actually left over from the native hedge that I planted at the top of the garden. I just put a few things in here, and I'm trying to sort of train it into an arch. And we have to go past a little patch of red campion, which the bees are busy on. Actually, this is a very nice place to stand. It's nice and cool in the shade of the hedge. But sorry bees, we're going to have to disturb you through the arch and back to the lawn and the summer house. So just pause to have a look at the bee hotels, where the bees have been busy filling the tubes with their eggs and pollen. Yes, a few of them have been blocked up now, and just 2 in that one. And then we go down a narrow series of steps to the old woodshed. That's over 100 years old, that shed. And as you can see, has seen better days, but I do love it. And then on the left is a wild area. There's what I call the new pond here, and this grassy area which I sowed last spring. So this is its second year. So last year it was just growing, and now this year it's grown. And the reason for the long grass is that it's just a great habitat for all sorts of creatures, little amphibians and reptiles and voles and mice, and also food for, again, invertebrates, for our native butterfly and moth caterpillars. And this is the new pond. I made this not last winter but the winter before. So this is its second season, really, its second growing season and colonising season. And so there's not as much wildlife in here as there is in the other one. But I tell you what there are, which is lots of little hoverflies buzzing around. So I'm guessing that these hoverflies like to lay their eggs in clean water rather than stagnant water. But just in case there's a hoverfly that would like some stagnant water, there's a hoverfly lagoon here as well. So up past the woodshed to the polytunnel, and down the side of the polytunnel I also sowed meadowgrass. So this is another long grassy area. But there's wood piles, and there's an open compost heap in the corner, and another hoverfly lagoon. And then this is the polytunnel with my open window at the end for the insects to escape, and various sorts of vegetables. You see there's a great bumblebee up there, but let's hope she finds a way out. So this is my view from the door to the polytunnel of this enormous Weigelia. This was here when I came, and I used to prune it and keep it in shape, and then I decided to stop and see what happened, and of course it just went mad. Yeah, I'm going to get to the point where I can't get into the polytunnel. But the smell is just lovely. The flowers are just gorgeous, and the bees love it. So yeah, let it flower. I'll cut it back if it gets in my way. This is such a lovely place to stand because I'm standing underneath this honeysuckle, which is growing over an arch. This was just a piece of metal that came out of a mine. It was flat. My next door neighbour gave it me, and we bent it into an arch shape and put it there. And there's a honeysuckle growing up that side and a clematis growing up the other. And I'm also training the honeysuckle to grow along the roof of the woodshed. I'll just go back up the steps and film it from that side. We brought it with us from Wigan, and the one that we had in Wigan was a cutting that was in my father's garden. So yeah, it's quite a special honeysuckle. And it's doing quite well. I would say it's covered about a quarter of the roof of the woodshed. I'd like to have it covering it all, but be a little while yet, I think. So then we go back down, and if we turn left here, we go down to the cottage, to the back door of the cottage. And for those eagle eyes amongst you, notice that there is a bee box on the side of the house, because I've actually moved 2 of them. They were all on the summer house, and I've moved one to here and one to the front fence. And so they're all in different locations now, facing in different directions. So we'll see which ones attract the most bees. So I'm back at the top of the garden, sheltering in the shade of the hedge. And that's the end of the May garden tour. So this is what my Wild Welsh garden looks like in the middle of May, in the middle of a drought. And yeah, so hope you've enjoyed your visit to my Wild Welsh garden. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in following my continuing efforts to wild my garden and make it even better for wildlife. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Hwyl fawr!